Hi guys, welcome to this read with Gurpreet session. So today जो आज इस वीडियो से जो मैं शेयर करूँगा that is about my session. Particularly prefer to read a lot, and with the reading we increase our knowledge and we increase the repository of our knowledge, which helps us in improving our various skills. And then further, with skills we increase our incomes, and with incomes we increase our money box. So after this reading session, there will be a live session on how to increase your money box on my YouTube channel. Anybody who is not registered for that or haven't gone through it, then you can go through my YouTube channel regards to same. So today, what we are going to discuss about is in Read with Gurpreet session is that I'll be particularly having today's reading session on Richard Feynman. Richard Feynman was a world-renowned physicist, and we will learn from him that what is his repository of wisdom and what we can grab from that. So particularly the reading session that I'll be doing today will be myself first time also reading the sessions, and with this live session, what my main purpose is to have my personal notes, and on the same hand I'll be sharing the same with all of you with the world. And wherever the main reason for this live stream is that whenever I'll want to learn something more about Richard Feynman, then I will get back to my YouTube channel and see this live stream, where I can get back to the notes that I'll be making in this video and understand the real purpose and learn a lot from the Richard Feynman itself. So today in this live read it with Gurpreet session, so today we'll be discussing about this Feynman learning technique first. So we'll as the topic of today is that about Richard Feynman and his repository of wisdom. So we will read 5 to 6 articles on Richard Feynman, and how what was his perspective on different aspects of his life. And from him we will learn a lot, because it is already being said that if we learn from the masters who have already figured out, then it will gives it an extra edge to be and to compete in the world, where these things also play a lot of role in our life. So basically when you learn from someone who's already in master in something, then that gives you an extra edge, and you prepare your own self, you increase your own mental arsenal. And whenever you feel that you require something, these types of knowledge will help you in uh, winning a lot of things in life. So let's start with today's first article, which is about the Feynman learning technique. Okay, so for before moving ahead, I would like to tell you that I'm being following this blog, Finance Street blog, from a lot of time. Like Shane Parrish has done a very good work in this, and he have basically compiled the learnings from the masters who have already figured out. And today we are going to just reread them and understand them, what Richard Feynman said in various of his articles. So today we will understand the first. We will go through the first article, which is a Finmen learning technique. So let's start our reading session. So if you're after a way of to supercharge your learning and become smarter, the Feynman technique is the best way to learn absolutely anything. Devised by a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, it leverages the power of teaching for better learning. So everybody have their own learning process. Feynman had in his own learning process. So what Feynman had and what was his technique to learn something whenever he want to learn in a particular subject or particular topic, or he want to solve particular problem, and he had his own process to learn and go through that particular topic. So we will learn his own technique and how this technique can be beneficial to you whenever you are going to learn through or go through some particular subject. The Feynman learning technique is a simple way of approaching anything new you want to learn. Why use it? Because learning doesn't happen from skimming through a book or remembering enough to pass a test. Information is learned when you can explain it and use it in a wide variety of situations. The Feynman technique gets more mileage from the ideas you encounter instead of blending anything new into isolated, useless factoids. When you really learn something, you give yourself a tool to use for the rest of your life. The more you know, the fewer surprises you will encounter, because most new things will connect to something you already understand. So basically, whenever we learn something, we give ourselves a tool, tool for the rest of our life. So the more you know, the fewer surprises you will encounter, because most of things will connect to something you already understand. So this is very important topic that we need, important paragraph that we need to understand. So जब भी हम कुछ सीखते हैं, हमारी जो लर्निंग्स होती है वो हमें लाइफ में अलग अलग एस्पेक्ट्स में हेल्प करती है. हमें नहीं पता लगता आज की डेट में कि हम हमें कहाँ हेल्प करेगी, बट पर्टिकुलरली वो चीजें आगे जाके लाइफ में आपको हेल्प करती हैं. तो आपको कंटिन्यूअसली लर्न करते रहना है, ग्रो करते रहना है. द मोर यू लर्न द मोर यू विल बी ग्रोइंग एंड कंपाउंडिंग अपना इफेक्ट करती है। आप चाहे 10 पेजेस ही पढ़िए दिन के, चाहे आप एक आर्टिकल ही पढ़िए, बट अगर आप इस हैबिट को कंटिन्यूसली मेंटेन रखते हैं तो वो आपको ओवर द पीरियड कंपाउंड होकर आपको वो असर बनाती है, आपको एक बेहतर इंसान बनाती है। सो अल्टीमेटली द पॉइंट ऑफ लर्निंग इज टू अंडरस्टैंड द वर्ल्ड, बट मोस्ट ऑफ अस डोंट बॉदर टू डेलिबरेटली लर्न एनीथिंग। We memorize what we need as we move through school, then forget most of it. As we continue through life, we don't extrapolate from our experiences to broaden the applicability of our knowledge. Consequently, life kicks us in the ass time and again. To avoid the pain of being bewildered by the unexpected, the Feynman technique helps you turn information into knowledge that you can access as easily as a shirt in your closet. Let's go. The Feynman technique. Any intelligent fool can make things bigger, more complex, and more violent. It takes a touch of genius and a lot of courage to move into the opposite direction. By E.F. Scumherd. So there are 4 steps of the Feynman learning technique. Based on the method Richard Feynman originally used, we have adapted it slightly after reflecting on our own experiences using the process to learn. The steps are as follows. Pretend to teach a concept you want to learn about a student in the 6th grade. तो बेसिकली 4 स्टेप्स है, जिसमें पहला स्टेप जो फेनमैन टेक्निक का जो 4 स्टेप्स है, जिसमें सबसे पहला स्टेप है कि आपको कंसेप्ट को समझना है, इस तरीके से समझना है कि आप उस कंसेप्ट को एक 6th ग्रेड के बच्चे को भी इजीली समझा सके। आइडेंटिफाई करिए, आइडेंटिफाई गैप्स इन योर एक्सप्लेनेशन, गो बैक टू द सोर्स मटेरियल टू बेटर अंडरस्टैंड इट। अगर आपको लगता है कि आप उस तरीके से उसको नहीं समझा पाए, ठीक है, तो आपको वो दोबारा एक बार गो थ्रू करना है, री रीड करना है, अंडरस्टैंड करना है कि गैप क्यों आया। जब वो गैप आपको अंडरस्टैंड हो जाए तो आपको फिर ऑर्गेनाइज करना है, सिंप्लीफाई करना है उसको, प्रोसेस को, कि आपने जो सीखा वो आपने समझा पाए कि नहीं पाए। जैसे आज अगर मैं आपको समझाने की कोशिश करूं कि फेनमैन लर्निंग टेक्निक है क्या, तो ये बेसिकली 4 स्टेप का प्रोसेस है। पहला स्टेप क्या है कि आप ये प्रोसेस क्या है, जब भी मुझे कुछ सीखना है तो मुझे आपको वो समझाना है, ऐसे समझाना है, ऐसे प्रिटेंड करना है कि जैसे मैं 6th ग्रेड के बच्चे को समझा रहा हूँ। तो जब मैं उसको इजीली समझा सकता हूँ कि सिंपल ये प्रोसेस है क्या, तो वो आपको, अगर आपको लगता है यार मुझे लग रहा है कि यार मैं यहाँ पे आपको पर्टिकुलरली नहीं समझा रहा, तो इसका मतलब है कि मुझे वो कंसेप्ट अभी नहीं समझा है, मुझे जाना है वापस उसको फिर रीड करना है, फिर अंडरस्टैंड करना है। अगर मुझे समझ आ जाए फिर मैं उसको ऑर्गेनाइज करना है, सिंप्लीफाई करना है, देन उसको फिर दोबारा समझाना है। So this is what the Feynman learning technique is. We will understand now more in detail. So first step is pretend to teach a concept you want to learn about a student in the 6th grade. Second is identify gaps in your explanation. Go back to the source material to better understand it. Third is organize and simplify. Fourth is transmit, which is optional. So step 1 is pretend to teach it to a child or a rubber duck. Take out a blank sheet of a paper. At the top, write the subject you want to learn. Now write out everything you know about the subject as if you are teaching to a child or a rubber duck sitting on your desk. You are not teaching to a smart adult friend, but rather a child who has just enough vocabulary and attention span to understand basic concepts and relationship. मतलब कोई भी सब्जेक्ट है वो ऐसे बच्चे को समझाना है जिसको कोई भी आपके बेसिकली वोकैबुलरी, अटेंशन, कोई भी पर्टिकुलरली नहीं उनको पता, उस टर्म्स के बारे में नहीं पता, तो एक बड़ी लेमन टर्म्स में आपको बच्चे को समझाना है सब्जेक्ट को। सो और फॉर अ डिफरेंट एंगल ऑन द फेनमैन टेक्निक, यू कुड प्लेस अ रबर डक ऑन योर डेस्क एंड ट्राई एक्सप्लेनिंग द कंसेप्ट टू इट। Software engineers sometimes tackle debugging by explaining their code line by line to a rubber duck. So basically यहाँ पे एग्जांपल दिया गया, एक रेफरेंस दिया गया है कि ऐसे ही सॉफ्टवेयर इंजीनियर्स भी जब अपने कोड में कोई गलती उसको उनको पता करनी होती है तो वो कोड को बेसिकली एक रबर डक को एक्सप्लेन करते हैं कि लाइन बाय लाइन, ताकि उन्हें पता लगे कि हाँ मैंने सारा कुछ सिंप्लीफाई करके सही तरीके से किया है कि नहीं किया, तो डिबगिंग उन्हें करनी होती है। सो द आइडिया इज दैट एक्सप्लेनिंग समथिंग टू अ सिली लुकिंग इनएनिमेट ऑब्जेक्ट विल फोर्स यू टू एज सिंपल एज पॉसिबल। It turns out that one of the ways we mask our lack of understanding is by using complicated vocabulary and jargon. The truth is, if you can't define the words and terms of you are using, you don't really know what you are talking about. If you look at a painting and describe it as abstract because that's what you heard in art class, you aren't displaying any comprehension of the painting. You are just mimicking what you have heard. And you haven't learned anything. You need to make sure your explanation isn't above, say, a 6th grade reading level by using easily accessible words and phrases. So when you write out an idea, start from a finished in simple language that a child can understand. You force yourself to understand the concept at a deeper and simplify your relationships and connections between ideas. You can better explain the why behind your description of that. Looking at the same painting again, you will be able to say that the painting doesn't display buildings like the ones we look at every day. Instead, it uses certain shapes and colors to depict a city landscape. You will be able to point out at what these are. You will be able to engage in a speculation about why the artist choose the shapes and those colors. You will be able to explain why artists sometimes do this, and you will be able to communicate what you think of the piece considering all of this. Chances are, after capturing a full explanation of the painting in the simplest possible terms that would be easily understood by a sixth grader, you will have learned a lot about the painting and abstract art in general. So some of capturing what you would teach will be easy. These are the places where you have a clear understanding of the subject, but you'll find many places where things are much foggy. So पहला स्टेप यही है कि हमें अपने सब्जेक्ट को हर सिंप्लीफाई तरीके से समझ के अंडरस्टैंड करके एक अपने ऐसे तरीके से समझाना है जैसे कि सामने कोई सिक्स ग्रेड का बच्चा बैठा हो, अगर हम उसको समझाने में सफल रहे, हमें अंदर से ट्यूशन है कि हम अपने सही तरीके से उसे समझा पाए हैं, तो वो एक आपको लर्निंग आपको मिलती है कि आप उस कंसेप्ट को सब्जेक्ट को अच्छी तरीके से समझ चुके हैं। अगर आप किसी सिक्स ग्रेड के बच्चे को ऐसे सिंप्लीफाइड टर्म्स में नहीं समझा सकते, तो मतलब वहाँ पे गैप है, आपको उस गैप को जानना है और उस गैप को जानने के बाद उसको ऑर्गेनाइज करना है, सिंप्लीफाई करना है, दोबारा समझाना है। जब तक आपको एक कॉन्फिडेंस ना आ जाए, तब तक आप उस सब्जेक्ट को नहीं लर्न कर पाए हो। तो स्टेप 2 है आइडेंटिफाई गैप्स इन योर एक्सप्लेनेशन। एरियाज वेयर यू स्ट्रगल इन स्टेप 1 आर द पॉइंट्स वेयर यू हैव सम गैप्स इन योर अंडरस्टैंडिंग। Identify gaps in your knowledge where you forget something important, aren't able to explain it, or simply have trouble thinking of how variables interact. It is a critical part of the learning process. Filling those gaps is when you really make the learning stick. So now that you know where you have gaps in your understanding, go back to the source material, augment it with other sources, look up definitions, keep going until you can explain everything you need to in a basic terms. So only when you can explain your understanding without jargon and in simple terms can you demonstrate your understanding. Think about it this way. If you require complicated terminology to explain what you know, you have no flexibility. When someone asks you a question, you can only repeat what you have already said. तो बेसिकली अगर आप अपने एक ही बात को रिपीट करी जा रहे हैं, तो इसका मतलब या एक ऐसी टर्मिनोलॉजी बता रहे हैं जो सामने वाले को समझ नहीं आएगी, दैट इसका मतलब है कि आपको खुद को वो कंसेप्ट प्रॉपर्ली क्लियर नहीं है और आप वही चीज बार बार दोहराई जा रहे हैं. So simple terms can be arranged and easily combined with other words to communicate your point. When you can say something in multiple ways using different words, you understand it really well. Being able to explain something in a simple, accessible way shows you have done the work required to learn. Skipping it leads to the illusion of knowledge, an illusion that can be quickly shattered when challenged. Identify the boundaries of your understanding is also a way of redefining your circle of competence. So when you know what you know and are honest about what you don't know, you limit the mistakes you are able to make and increase your chances of success when applying knowledge. This is very important. Read it again. Identifying the boundaries of your understanding is also a way of defining your सर्कल ऑफ कॉम्पिटेंस. मतलब आपको ये जानना कि मुझे क्या समझ आता है, ये आपको जानना ही, आपको सर्कल ऑफ कॉम्पिटेंस एक बनाना पड़ेगा कि मेरा दायरा क्या है, मुझे एक्चुअल में क्या क्या समझ आता है. व्हेन यू नो व्हाट यू नो, आपको पता होता है कि आपको क्या पता है, एंड आर ऑनेस्ट अबाउट यू डोंट नो, और आपको ये भी आप उसके अपने प्रति एक ईमानदार है कि मुझे हाँ इस टॉपिक के बारे में नहीं पता. You limit the mistakes you are liable to make and increase your chance of success when applying knowledge. जब आप ये एडमिट करते हो, आप अपने आप को ईमानदारी से बताते हो कि हाँ मुझे इस पर्टिकुलर टॉपिक के बारे में नहीं पता, इस सब्जेक्ट के बारे में नहीं पता, तो अपनी गलतियों को आप कम कर लेते हो. और जब आप गलतियों को कम कर लेते हो, तो आप अपने सक्सेसफुल होने के, अपने नॉलेज को अप्लाई करके सक्सेसफुल होने के चांसेस बढ़ा लेते हो. Third step is organize and simplify. Now you have a set of handcrafted notes containing a simple explanation. Organize them into a narrative that you can tell from beginning to end. Read it out loud. If the explanation sounds confusing at any point, go back to step number 2. Keep iterating until you have a story that you can tell it to anyone who will listen. If you follow this approach over and over, you will end up with a binder of full pages of different subjects. If you take some time twice a year to go through this binder, you will find just how much you retain. ट्रांसमिट विच इज ऑप्शन स्टेप नंबर 4. मतलब आपको ऑर्गेनाइज करना है अपने नोट्स. अगर आपको जब तक लगता है कि मैं पर्टिकुलर सिंपल तरीके से नहीं समझा पा रहा सब्जेक्ट को, तो आपको बार बार ऑर्गेनाइज करना है, बार बार नोट्स बनाने हैं, सिंपल तरीके से उसको सिंप्लीफाई करने की कोशिश करनी है. जब तक आप ये कर नहीं सकते, तब तक आपको करते ही रहना, ट्राई करते रहना, जब तक आप सिंपल तरीके से किसी को समझा नहीं सकते. अगर आप 2 साल में देखोगे तो अपने जो नोट्स बनाए हुए हैं, इन नोट्स को आपको काफ़ी चीज़ें और सिंप्लीफाई करेंगी. So fourth step is last step, which is an option step, that is transmit. This part is optional, but it's logical result of everything you have just done. If you really want to be sure of your understanding, run it past someone, ideally someone who knows little of the subject. The ultimate test of your knowledge is your capacity to convey to another. You can read out directly when you have read what you have written. You can present the material like a lecture. You can ask your friends for a few minutes of their time while you are buying them dinner. You can volunteer as a guest speaker in your child's classroom or your parents' retirement residence. All that really matters is that you attempt to transmit the material to at least one person who isn't familiar with it. The question you get and the feedback you receive are invaluable for further developing your understanding. Hearing what your audience is curious about is like pique your own curiosity and set your own path for further learning. After it's only when you begin to learn a few things really well do you appreciate how much there is to know. जब आप समझते हैं, आप जानते हैं कि कितना कुछ सीखने को है, तभी आप समझते हैं कि ये अब किसी तरीके किसी को अगर आप ये ट्रांसमिट का बेसिकली 4 स्टेप का मतलब है कि अगर आपको सिंपल तरीके से मतलब जो आपने सीखा है, जो आपने ऑर्गेनाइज़ किया है, वो आप किसी ऐसी जगह पे जिनको उस टॉपिक के बारे में कुछ नॉलेज हो या थोड़ा बहुत समझ रखते हो, आप एक बड़े बंदे को समझाना है। उसको समझा सकते हो आप सिंपल तरीके से, तो मतलब आपको एक कॉन्फिडेंस आता है कि हाँ, जो मैंने सीखा है, आप अपने नोट्स को पढ़ के भी समझा सकते हो। जब ये करते हो तो आपको एक सब्जेक्ट के बारे में और एनहांसमेंट मिलती है और फीडबैक जो मिलते हैं वो आपके लिए बहुत वैल्यूएबल होते हैं। So the Feynman technique is not only a wonderful recipe for learning but also a window into a different way of thinking that allows you to tear ideas apart and reconstruct them from the ground up. When you are having a conversation with someone and they start using your words or relationship that you don't understand, ask them to explain it to you like you are 12. Not only will you supercharge your own learning, but you will also supercharge theirs. Feynman's approach intuitively believes that intelligence is a process of growth, which dovetails nicely with the work of Carol Dweck, who describes the difference between the fixed and the growth mindsets. So, if you can't reduce a difficult engineering problem to just one, 8.5, and 11-inch sheet of paper, you will probably never understand it. Ralph Pack. So, what does it mean to know? Richard Feynman believed that the world is much more interesting than any one discipline. He understands the difference between knowing something and knowing the name of something, as well as how, when you truly know something, you can use that knowledge broadly. When you only know that something is called, you have no real sense of what is it is. You can't take it apart and play with it or use it to make new connections and generate new insights. When you know something, the labels are unimportant because it's not necessary to keep it in the box it came in. So the person who says he knows what he thinks but cannot express it usually does not know what he thinks. Mortimer Adler. So basically, now what Feynman explanations on why questions, why trains stay on the tracks as they go around a curve, how we look for new laws of science, how rubber band work as are simple and powerful. Here he articulates the difference between knowing the name of something and understanding it. So see that bird? It's a brown throated thrush, but in German it's called a Halsenvogel, and in Chinese they call it a Hafun. Even if you know all those names for it, you still know nothing about the bird. So you only know something about people, what they call the bird. Now that thrush sings and teaches its young to fly and flies so many miles away during the summer across the country, and nobody knows how it finds its way. सो बेसिकली फेनमैन यहाँ पे कहते हैं कि अगर आप एक चिड़िया को देखते हैं और वो चिड़िया के नाम को देखो, अगर जर्मनी में बताया जाए तो उस चिड़िया को अगर हेल्सन फीगल बोला जाता है और चाइनीज में अगर उसको चुंगलिंग बोला जाता है, तो अगर आपने ये सारे नाम जान लिए डिफरेंट डिफरेंट लैंग्वेजेस में और आप बोलो आपको बर्ड के बारे में सब कुछ पता है, तो ये बिल्कुल गलत है। आपको बर्ड के बारे में कुछ नहीं पता, आपको बस इंसानों के उन डिफरेंट डिफरेंट नाम्स के बारे में पता है। तो आप पर्टिकुलर सब्जेक्ट को डिफरेंट डिफरेंट तरीके से जानने की बजाय उस सब्जेक्ट के ऊपर फोकस करेंगे तो आपको ज्यादा नॉलेज होगी। सो नोइंग द नेम ऑफ समथिंग डजंट मीन यू अंडरस्टैंड इट। वी टॉक इन अ फैक्ट डेफिशिएंट ऑप्शन obfuscating generalities to cover up our lack of understanding. So how then we should go about learning? On this, Feynman echoes Albert Einstein and proposes that we take things apart. He describes a dismal first grade science book that attempts to teach kids about energy by showing a series of pictures about a wind up dog toy and asking what matters it move. For Feynman, this is the wrong approach because it was too abstract. Saying the energy made the dog move was equal to saying that God make it move or spirit make it move or mobility is something. In fact, one could equally well say energy makes it stop. So staying at the level of the abstract imparts a no real understanding. Kids might subsequently get the question right on a test if they have a decent memory, but they aren't going to have any understanding of what energy actually is. So Feynman then goes on to describe a more useful approach. Perhaps I can make the difference a little clearer this way. If you ask a child what makes a toy dog move, you should think about what an ordinary human being would answer. The answer is that you wound up the spring, it tries to unwind and pushes the gear around. So what a good way to begin a science course. Takes apart the toy, see how it works, see the cleverness of the gears, see the ratchets, learn something about the toy, the way the toy put together, the integrity of the people devising the ratchets and other things. That's good. So after the Feynman technique, we take others' men's knowledge and opinions upon trust, which is an idle and superficial learning. We must make them our own. We are just like a man who needing fire went to the neighbor's fire house to fetch it and finding a very good one there, sat down to warm himself without remembering to carry uh, any back home. What good does it to us to have our belly full of meat if it is not digested? If it's not transformed into us, if it's not nourish and support us, Michael Dean maintained. The Feynman technique, you learn stuff, but learning doesn't happen in isolation. We learn not only from the books we read, but also from the people we talk to and nervous and the various position, ideas, and opinions we are exposed to. The Richard Feynman also provided advice on how to sort it through information so you can decide what is relevant and what you should bother learning. In a series of non-technical lectures in 1963, memorialized in a short-term book called The Meaning of It All, Thoughts of a Citizen Scientist, Feynman talks through basic reasoning and some of the problems of his day. These methods of evaluation information is another set of tools you can use along the famous learning technique to define what you learn. Particularly useful for a series of tricks of the trade he gives in a section called this unscientific age. These tricks show Feynman taking the method of thought he learned in pure science and applying it to the more mundane topics most of us have to deal with every day. Before we start, it's worth noting that Feynman takes pain to mention that not everything needs to be considered with scientific accuracy. It's up to you to determine where applying these tricks might be the most beneficial in your life. So हमें फेनमैन बताते हैं कि हमें खुद जानना है कि हर चीजें हमें साइंटिफिक एक्यूरेसी के साथ जानने की जरूरत नहीं है. हमें खुद जानना है कि हमें ये कौन सी ट्रिक्स कहाँ पे अप्लाई करके अपनी लाइफ में बेनिफिशियल हो सकती है. So regardless of what you are trying to gather information on, these tricks help you dive deeper into topics and ideas and not get waylaid by the inaccuracies and misunderstandings on your journey to truly know something. अगर हमें लाइफ में कुछ जानना है तो ये चीज़ें हमें इंफॉर्मेशन गैदर करना जो बेसिकली है, ये हमें हेल्प करता है उन टॉपिक्स पे डाइव इन करने पे और डिग डीप करने पे, ताकि हमें वो इनएक्यूरेसी मिसअंडरस्टैंडिंग जो है वो हमें समझ आए कि इसका कोई क्या मतलब है हमारी लाइफ में. एक्चुअल में भी एक मतलब है. सो एज वी एंटर द रियल्म ऑफ नोएबल थिंग्स द साइंटिफिक सेंस, द फर्स्ट ट्रिक हैज टू डू विद डिसाइडिंग वेदर समवन हैज ट्रूली नोज देयर स्टफ और इज मिमिकिंग अदर्स. तो जब भी हम कोई ऐसी चीज जिसको जो एक नोएबल हम किसी चीज के बारे में जानना चाह रहे हैं, तो फर्स्ट ट्रिक क्या है, हमें ये डिसाइड करना कि सामने वाले बंदे को एक्चुअल में इस टॉपिक के बारे में कुछ पता है, ये बस एक जानने का एक नाटक कर रहा है. सो माय ट्रिक दैट आई यूज इज वेरी इजी. If you ask him intelligent question that is penetrating, interested, honest, frank, direct, sorry, direct questions from the subject and no trick questions, then he quickly gets stuck. So it is like a child asking naive questions. If you ask naive but relevant questions, then almost immediately the person doesn't know the answer. So if he is an honest man, it is important to appreciate that. And I think that I can illustrate one unscientific aspect of the world, which would be probably very much better if it was more scientific. It has to do with politics. Suppose two politicians are running for president, and one goes to the farm section and is asked, "Why are you going to do about the farm question?" And he knows right away, bang, bang, bang. Now he goes to the next campaigner who came through. What are you going to do about the farm problem? Well, I don't know. I used to be a general and I don't know anything about farming. But it seems to me it must be a very difficult problem because for 12, 15, 20 years people have been struggling with it, and people say that they know how to solve the farm problem, and it must be a hard problem. So the way that I intend to solve the farm problem is to gather around me a lot of people who know something about it, to look at the experience, all the experience that we have had with this problem before, to make take a certain amount of time at it and then come to some conclusion in a reasonable way about it. Now I can't tell you ahead of time what conclusion, but I can give you some of the principle I'll try to use not to make things difficult for individual farmers. If there are any special problems, we will have to have some way to take care of them, etc. etc. If you learn something is the Feynman technique, you'll be able to answer questions with that. So basically यहाँ पे जो एक एग्जांपल दी है, उस एग्जांपल में ये बताया गया है कि सपोज दो टाइप के दो दो पर्सन है जो कि प्रेसिडेंट के लिए कैंपेन कर रहे हैं पॉलिटिक्स में. तो जब प्रेसिडेंट के लिए या प्राइम मिनिस्टर के लिए कोई दो कैंडिडेट्स लड़ रहे हैं, तो दोनों एक खेत में गए, तो वहां पे उनसे पूछा गया, एक से पूछा गया कि आप खेतों के बारे में क्या कर रहे हैं, इस प्रॉब्लम के बारे में. उसने बस बड़े बोल के अपने सारे ही सवालों के जवाब दे दिए। बट दूसरे से पूछा गया तो उसने प्रॉपरली एक प्रोसेस बताया कि देखो मैं तो एक जनरल था, मुझे फार्मिंग के बारे में कुछ नहीं पता, बट मुझे लग रहा है कि अगर ये 10-15, 12-15, 20 साल से लोग यहाँ के परेशान है, किसान परेशान है, तो मैं इनसे अंडरस्टैंड करूंगा कि इनकी एक्चुअली प्रॉब्लम क्या है, वो कैसे, और उन्हें पता भी है वो प्रॉब्लम कैसे सॉल्व हो सकती है। बट आई एम श्योर कि ये प्रॉब्लम बहुत ही मुश्किल होगी, तभी इनसे अब तक सॉल्व नहीं हुई है। पर मैं उनसे अंडरस्टैंड करूंगा, उनसे समझूंगा, और जो लोग इस टॉपिक में, इस फार्मिंग को लेके बहुत एक्सपीरियंस है, मैं उनको हायर करूंगा। एंड देन हम सब मिलके इस प्रॉब्लम को सॉल्व करेंगे। मेरे जो कुछ प्रिंसिपल्स हैं मैं उनको फॉलो करूंगा। उसके बाद मैं देखूंगा कि कैसे इस चीज को सॉल्व किया जा सकता है, सारी टीम को, एक्सपर्ट्स को साथ बिठा के। तो यहाँ पे दूसरे कैंपेनर ने प्रॉपर आपको एक प्रोसेस बताया। तो ये जो प्रोसेस बता के यहाँ पे पता लगता है हमें, सॉरी, तो यहाँ पे हमें पता लगता है कि कैसे दो पर्सन है, दोनों में से एक को कितनी नॉलेज है और एक को कितनी नॉलेज नहीं है अपने सब्जेक्ट के ऊपर। So this is something, if you learn something via the Feynman technique, you will be able to answer questions on the subject. You can make educated analogy, extrapolate the principles to other situations and easily admit what you do not know. आपको जब कोई चीज नहीं पता तो आपको उसको easily admit कर लेना चाहिए। So the second trick has to do with dealing with uncertainty. Very few ideas in life are absolutely true. What you want is to get as close as to the truth as you can with the information available. तो दूसरी ट्रिक है कि अनसर्टेनिटी से डील करना। तो बहुत कम ऐसे आइडियाज हैं जो एक्चुअल में बहुत सच होते हैं। सो व्हाट यू वांट टू डू इज टू गेट क्लोज टू द ट्रूथ एज यू कैन विद इंफॉर्मेशन। जितनी आपके पास इंफॉर्मेशन अवेलेबल है उससे आपको सच तक पहुंचना है जितना ज्यादा हो सके। So I would like to mention a somewhat technical idea, but it's the way you see. We have to understand how to handle uncertainty. How does something move from being almost certain false to being almost certainly true? So how does experience and it is complicated technically, but I'll give you a rather simpler idealized example. So you have we suppose two theories about the way something is going to happen, which I'll call theory A and theory B. Now it gets complicated. Theory A and B. Before you make any observation for some reason or other, that is your past experience and other observation and intuition and so on. Suppose that you are very much into more certain of a theory A than of theory B. More certain and much more sure. Theory B much more sure. So, but suppose that the thing that you are going to observe is a test. According to theory A, nothing should happen. According to theory B, it should turn blue. Well, you make that observation and it turns out of a sort of a greenish. Then you look at theory A and you say it's a very unlikely, and you turn to theory B and you say, well, it should be have turned sort of blue, but it wasn't impossible that it would turn sort of greenish color. So the result of this observation then is that a theory A is getting weaker and theory B is getting stronger. And if you continue to make more tests, then the odds on theory B increase. Incidentally, it is not the right to simply repeat the same test over and over and over, no matter how many times you look at it and still looks greenish. You haven't made up your mind yet. But if you find a whole lot of things that distinguish theory A from theory B that are different, then by accumulating a large number of these, the odds on B theory B increase. So basically, यहाँ पे जो समझने वाली चीज है कि यहाँ पे जो एग्जांपल दी गई है कि सपोज दो थ्योरीज है, वन इज थ्योरी ए और वन इज थ्योरी बी। तो आपको एक टेस्ट करना है, उस टेस्ट से आपको जानना है कि थ्योरी ए सही है या थ्योरी बी के अकॉर्डिंग इसके ऑड्स है इस टेस्ट के ऊपर। सो हुआ क्या कि थ्योरी ए में सपोज बोला जाता है कि आप ये टेस्ट करते हो तो कोई भी चेंज नहीं आएगा, और थ्योरी बी में बोला जाता है कि आप ये टेस्ट करते हो तो इसका कलर ब्लू हो जाएगा। तो आपने टेस्ट किया और उसका कलर ग्रीन हो गया, तो ऑड क्या होगा कि थ्योरी ए में तो कुछ भी नहीं था, बट ऑड थ्योरी बी में क्या था कि ब्लू हो जाएगा। कि आपने फिर सोचा कि यार ब्लू नहीं हुआ, ग्रीन हो गया, लगभग मतलब ब्लू की तरफ, थ्योरी बी की तरफ जो है प्रोबेबिलिटी बढ़ती है, आपका जो फोकस है वो थ्योरी बी के ऊपर जो ऑड्स है वो बढ़ जाते हैं। तो अगर आप ये चीज सेम टेस्ट बार बार कर रहे हो, बार बार ग्रीन आ रहा है, इससे आपका लॉजिक नहीं चेंज होगा, आपका ऑड्स बी की तरफ ही नहीं बढ़ेंगे। बेसिकली आपको अंडरस्टैंड करना होगा कि थ्योरी ए और थ्योरी बी में एक्चुअली में डिफरेंशिएशन क्या है, और उस डिफरेंशिएशन के आधार पे हर बार जो आप नया टेस्ट कर रहे हो उसमें आपको नया पहलू सामने नजर होके आ रहा है। तो जब आप अपने पहलुओं को समझोगे, पहलुओं को जानोगे, तब आप उसको और बेटर तरीके से इंक्रीज करके से फाइनलाइज डिसीजन ले सकते हो, जो आपके माइंड को, मतलब आपको अपने टेस्ट करके, अपनी कोशिश करके, इंफॉर्मेशन के साथ सच की तरफ जाना है। तो यहाँ से आप लर्निंग और अपनी इंप्रूव करते हो। सो फेनमैन इज टॉकिंग अबाउट ग्रे थिंकिंग है। तो ये जो प्रोसेस है इसको ग्रे थिंकिंग बोलते हैं। ग्रे थिंकिंग के बारे में भी हम कमिंग अपने रीडिंग सेशन में डिस्कशन करेंगे। सो द एबिलिटी टू पुट थिंग्स ऑन अ ग्रेडियंट फ्रॉम अ प्रोबब्ली ट्रू टू प्रोबब्ली फॉल्स एंड हाउ टू डील विद अनसर्टेनिटी, ही इज इन proposing a method of figuring out absolute doctrine truth. Another term for what he's proposing is a Bayesian updating, starting with the priority odds based on early understanding and updating the odds of something based on what you learn thereafter, an extremely useful tool. So Feynman's की third technique trick क्या है? तीसरी trick क्या है? Is a realization that as we investigate whether something is true or not, new evidence and new methods of experimentation should show the effects of getting stronger and stronger, not weaker. Knowledge is not a static. We need to open to continually evaluate the what we think we know. Here he uses an excellent example of analyzing mental telepathy. A professor, I think somewhere in Virginia, has done a lot of experiments for a number of years on the subject of mental telepathy. The same kind of stuff as mind reading. In his early experiments, the game was to set up cards with various designs on them. You probably know all this because they sold the cards and people used to play the game. And you would guess whether it's a circle or triangle and so on while someone else was thinking about it. You would sit around and not see the card, and he would see the card and think about the card, and you will get what it was. And in the beginning of these researches, he found very remarkable effects. He found people who would guess to 10 to 15 of the cards correctly, then it would be on the average for only 5. More even than that, there were some who would come very close to 100% in going through all the cards, excellent mind readers. A number of people pointed out a certain set of criticism. One thing, for example, is that he didn't count all the cases that didn't work, and he just took the few that did, and then you can't do statistics anymore. And then there were a large number of apparent clues by which signals advertently were being transmitted from one to the other. Various criticism of the techniques and the statistical methods were made by the people. The technique was therefore improved. The result was that although 5 cards should be the average, it averaged about 6.5 cards over a large number of tests. Never did he get anything like 10 or 15 or 25 cards. Therefore, the phenomena is that the first experiments are wrong. The second experiments prove that the phenomena observed in the first experiment were non-existent. The fact that we have 6.5 instead of 5 on the average now brings up a new possibility, and that there is such a thing as mental telepathy, but at much lower level. It's a different idea because if the thing was really there before, having improved the methods of experiment, the phenomena would still be there. It would still be 15 cards. Why is it down to 6.5? Because the technique improved. Now it still is that the 6.5 a little bit higher than the average of statistics. And various people criticize it more subtly and notice a couple of other slight effects which might account for the results. So it turned out that the people would get tired during the test. According to the professor, the evidence showed that they were getting a little bit lower on the average number of agreements. Well, if you take out the cases that are low, the law of statistics don't work, and the average is a little higher than the 5, and so on. So if the man was tired, the last 2 or 3 were thrown away. Things of this nature were improved till further. The results were that the mental telepathy still exists, but this time at 5.1 on the average. And therefore, all the experiment which indicate 6.5 were false. Now, what about the 5? Well, we can go on forever, but the point is that there are always errors in experiments that are subtle and unknown. But the reason that I do not believe that the researchers in mental telepathy have led to a demonstration of its existence is that as the techniques was improved, the phenomena got weaker. In short, the later experiments in every case disproved all the results of the former experiments. If remembered that way, then you can appreciate the situation. We must refine our process for probing and experimenting if we are to get the real truth. Always watching out for the little troubles, otherwise we torture the world so that our results fit our expectation. If we carefully refine and retest and the effect that gets weaker all the time, it's likely not to be true or at least not to be the magnitude originally hoped for. तो अगर हम कोई भी लाइफ में एक्सपेरिमेंट कर रहे हैं और हम बार बार टेस्ट करके हमारा जो रिजल्ट है हर बार नया रिजल्ट आ रहा है और पुराने से कोई मैच नहीं हो रहा और हम किसी एक पहलू तक भी नहीं पहुंच रहे एक सोल्यूशन तक भी नहीं पहुंच रहे तो हमें इंस्टेड ऑफ अपनी सारी दुनिया से लड़ने की बजाय कि आप हमारे अकॉर्डिंग सोचो हमें अपने आप को समझाना है कि हम जो कर रहे हैं जो हमने ओरिजिनली सोचा था वो सही नहीं है तो हमें यहाँ पे अपने आप को चेंज करना पड़ेगा अपने टेस्ट करने के बाद अगर हमें नहीं रिजल्ट आ रहा तो हमें उस चीज़ को समझना ही पड़ेगा कि आप कुछ गलत कर रहे हैं हम सारी दुनिया को नहीं ठीक करने की वजह पे लग जाना. So if we carefully refine and retest for the thing, the effect gets weaker all the time. It's likely not to be true, or at least not to be the magnitude originally hoped for. So chauthi trick. The fourth trick is to ask the right question, which is could be this the case, but is this actually the case? Many get so caught up with the former that they forgot to ask the latter. बेसिकली क्या है विच इज नॉट कुड बी दिस बी द केस क्या ये भी केस हो सकता है बट इज दिस एक्चुअली द केस क्या ये वाला केस एक्चुअल में हुआ है सो बहुत लोग जो है फॉर्मर यानी क्या ये केस हो सकता है इस पे ज्यादा फोकस करते हैं एंड दूसरा क्वेश्चन पूछना भूल जाते हैं कि क्या ये वाला केस है so that brings me to the fourth kind of attitude towards ideas, and that is that the problem is not what is possible. That's not the problem. The problem is what is probable, what is happening. It does no good to demonstrate again and again that you can't disprove that this would be a flying saucer. We have to guess ahead of the time whether we have to worry about the Martian invasion. We have to make a judgment about whether it is a flying saucer, whether it's reasonable, whether it's likely, and we do that on the basis of a lot more experience than whether it's just possible. Because the number of things we are that are possible is fully appreciated by the average individual, and it is not also not clear then to them how many things that are possible most must be happening. So that is impossible that everything that is possible is happening, and there is too much variety. So much, most likely anything that you think of that is possible isn't true. In fact, that's a general principle in physics theories. No matter what a guy thinks of, it's almost always false. So here have been 5 or 10 theories that to have been right in the history of physics, and that those are the ones we want. But that doesn't mean that everything false. We'll find out. Fifth trick. Fifth trick is a very common one. 150 years after Feynman pointed it out, even 50 years after Feynman pointed out, you cannot judge the probability of something happening after it's already happened. That's cherry picking. You have to run the experiment forward it for it to mean anything. A lot of scientists don't even appreciate this. In fact, the first time I got into an argument over this was when I was a graduate student at Princeton, and there was a guy in the psychology department who was running rat races. I mean, he has a T-shaped thing, and the rats go and they would go right and left and so on. And in a general principle of psychology, that is the test that they arrange so that the odds that they things that happen by chance is small, in fact, less than 1 in a 20. That means that 1 in a 20 of the laws is probably wrong, but the statistical ways of calculating the odds, like coin flipping, if the rats were to go randomly right and left, are easy to work out. This man had designed an experiment which would show something which I do not remember. If the rats always went to the right, let's say he had to go to a number of tests, because of course they would go to right accidentally. So to get it down to 1 in a 20 by odds, he had to do a number of them, and it's hard to do. And he did his number. Then he found that he worked. They went to the right, they went left, and so on. And he noticed most remarkably that they altered first right and then left, and then right and then left. And then he ran to me and he said, calculate the probability for me that they should alternate so that I can see less than 1 in 20. I said, it probably is less than 1 in 20, but it doesn't count. He said, why? I said, because it makes sense. It doesn't make any sense to calculate after the event. You see, you found it a peculiarity, and you selected the peculiar case. The fact that the right directions alternate suggests the possibility that rats alternate. If he wants to test this hypothesis, 1 in 20, he cannot do it from the same data that gave him the clue. He must do another experiment all over again and then see if this alternate he did, and it didn't work. तो बेसिकली अगर आपके लिए कोई एक्सपेरिमेंट नहीं वर्क कर रहा है, तो आपको समझना है कि मेरे लिए अगर पर्टिकुलर चीज, अगर 20 एक ऐसे इंस्टेंस है जहाँ पे यहाँ पे जैसे एक साइकोलॉजिस्ट एग्जांपल लिया है जहाँ पे वो एक टी शेप के इंस्ट्रूमेंट में रैट्स को भगा के वहाँ पे देखता है कि रैट्स पहले राइट गया कि लेफ्ट गया, तो साइकोलॉजी को अंडरस्टैंड करने की कोशिश करते हैं। तो वहाँ पे इन्होंने देखा कि एक ऐसा केस था जहाँ पे कि रैट जो है राइट लेके लेफ्ट होके, राइट लेके लेफ्ट होके फिर वापस आ गया। तो बाकी 19 केसेस में ऐसा नहीं हुआ। तो वो एक पर्टिकुलर केस के बेसिस पे पूरा प्रोबेबिलिटी निकालना चाह रहा था। तो वहां पे फेनमैन ने बोला कि ये गलत है तरीका। आपको अगर एक तरीके के जहां पे वर्कआउट किए सिर्फ उसी के बेसिस पे आप इसको नहीं निकाल सकते। अगर उसने और डाटा पे कोशिश करने को बोला, बट दोबारा एक्सपेरिमेंट करने की कोशिश करनी चाहिए, बट वहां पे उसका फ्रेंड नहीं माना। वहां पे उन्होंने सेम एक्सपेरिमेंट को ही बार बार कंटिन्यू किया, वो एट देन रिजल्ट कुछ नहीं निकला। तो ये चीजें फेनमैन भी हमें समझाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं। तो द सिक्स्थ ट्रिक इज दैट one that's familiar to almost all of us, yet almost all of us forget about every day. The plural of anecdote is not data. We must use proper statistical sampling to know whether or not we know what we are talking about. हमें प्रॉपर स्टैटिस्टिकल सैम्पलिंग देखनी चाहिए कि हमें कुछ पता भी है जो हम बात कर रहे हैं। तो द नेक्स्ट काइंड ऑफ टेक्निक दैट्स इन्वॉल्व्ड इन स्टैटिस्टिकल सैम्पलिंग. So I refer to that idea when I said they tried to arrange things so that they had 1 in a 20 odd. The whole subject of statistical sampling is somewhat mathematical, and I won't go to into the details. The general idea is kind of obvious. If you want to know how many people are taller than 6 feet tall, then you just pick people out at random, and you see that maybe 40 of them are more than 6 feet. So you guess that maybe everybody it is. Sounds stupid. Well, it is and it isn't. If you pick the 100 out by seeing which ones comes through a low door, you are going to get it wrong. If you pick the 100 out by looking at your friends, you'll get it wrong because they're all in one place in the one country. But if you pick out a way as far as anybody can figure out has no connection with their height at all, then if you find 40 out of 100, then 100 million, there will be more or less 40 million. How much more or how much less can be worked out quite accurately? In fact, it turns out that to be a more or less correct 1%, if you have 10,000 samples, people don't realize how difficult it is to get the accuracy high. For only 1 or 2%, you need to do 10,000 tries. So basically हमें बताया जा रहा है जो probability है, जो sample statistics है, वहाँ पे आपको ये देखना है कि अगर आप किसी की ये जानना चाह रहे हो कि अगर 6 फीट से ऊपर के लोगों की हाइट कितनी है, और आप एक पर्टिकुलर ऐसे एरिया में जहाँ पे आप 40 लोगों को बुला के उनकी हाइट चेक करो, 40 की 40 लोगों की 100 में से 40 लोगों की हाइट शेप फिट है और आप बोल रहे हो कि सभी की हाइट शेप फिट ज़्यादा होगी, तो ये बहुत ही स्टूपिड चीज़ होगी। तो बेसिकली यहाँ पे सभी ऐसे नहीं होंगे। आपको डाटा अलग-अलग तरीके से, अलग-अलग एरिया से जहाँ पे आपस में उनका कोई कनेक्शन ना हो, उस पे अगर आप स्टैटिस्टिक्स कर रहे हो तो वहाँ पे प्रोबेबिलिटी है कि 40 मिलियन मतलब 100 मिलियन में से 40 मिलियन की हाइट शेप फिट ज़्यादा होगी। बट अगर आप पर्टिकुलर एक सेक्टर, पर्टिकुलर एरिया, पर्टिकुलर सर्कल से आप ऐसा कर रहे हो, तो वो एक गलत डेटा है, तो वहाँ पे स्टैटिस्टिकल वर्क नहीं करेगी। आपको 10 से ज़्यादा पर स्टैटिस्टिकल डेटा करना पड़ेगा। So last trick क्या है? Last trick is that is to realize that many errors people make simply came from a lack of information. They don't know they are missing the tools they need. This can be a very tough one to guard against. It's hard to know when you are missing information what would change your mind, but Feynman gives a simple case of astrology to prove the point. Now, looking at the troubles that we have with all the scientific and peculiar things in the world, there are a number of them which cannot be associated with difficulties in how to think, I think, but are just due to some lack of information. In particular, there are believers in astrology, of which no doubt there are a number of here. Astrologists say that there are days when it's better to go to the dentist than other days. There are days when it's better to fly in an airplane. For you, if you are born on such a day and such an hour, and it's all calculated, be very careful. Rules in terms of position of the stars. If it were true, it would be very interesting. Insurance people would be very interested to change the insurance rates on the people if they follow the astrological rules, because they have a better chance than they are in an airplane. That's just to determine whether people who go on day and they are not supposed to go worse off or not to even been made by the astrologer. The question of whether it's a good day for business or a bad day for business has never been established. Now, what of it? Maybe it's still a true. Yes. On the other hand, there's an awful lot of information that indicate that isn't true, because we have a lot of knowledge about how things work, what people are, and what the world is, what those stars are, what the planets are that you are looking at, what makes them go and more or less, where they are going to be in the next 2000 years, completely known. They don't have to look up to find out where it is. And furthermore, if you look very carefully at the different astrologers, they don't agree with each other. So what are you going to do? Disbelieve? There's no evidence at all. It's a pure nonsense. The only way you can believe is to have a general lack of information about the stars and the world and the rest of the things look like. If such a phenomena exists, it would be most remarkable in the face of all other phenomena that exist. And unless someone can demonstrate it to you with a real experiment, with a real set, took example to people who believe and people who didn't believe and made a test and so on, then there is no point in listening to them. तो यहाँ पे एस्ट्रोलॉजी के ऊपर कुछ बोला गया है कि वहाँ पे जो डेटा है वहाँ पे कई लोगों का अगर आप जो बिलीव करते हैं जो नहीं बिलीव करते उन पे टेस्ट करोगे, प्रॉपर एक रिमार्केबल तरीका नहीं अभी तक निकला है, तो इस पे कई लोग बिलीव करते हैं, कई लोग नहीं करते हैं, तो देयर इज नो पॉइंट इन लिसनिंग टू दैम। तो कंक्लूजन क्या है? नोइंग समथिंग इज वैल्यूएबल। द मोर यू अंडरस्टैंड अबाउट हाउ द वर्ल्ड वर्क्स, द मोर ऑप्शंस यू हैव फॉर डीलिंग विद द अनएक्सपेक्टेड एंड द बेटर you can create and capitalize on opportunities. The Feynman learning technique is a great method to develop mastery over sets of information. Once you do, the knowledge becomes a powerful tool at your disposal. But as Feynman himself showed, being willing and able to question your knowledge and the knowledge of others is how you keep improving. Learning is a journey. If you want to learn more about Feynman ideas and teaching, we recommend surely to read few of these more articles. सो बेसिकली जो अब हमने यहाँ पे डिस्कस किया दैट इज अबाउट फेनमैन, मिस्टर रिचर्ड फेनमैन। सो फेनमैन रिचर्ड फेनमैन की हमने यहाँ पे लर्निंग ट्रिक के बारे में समझने की कोशिश करी, अंडरस्टैंड करने की कोशिश करी, जो कि बहुत ही हमें हेल्पफुल करती है लाइफ में। बहुत डिफरेंट डिफरेंट एस्पेक्ट जब हम कुछ सीखना चाहते हैं ना, कई 6-7 ट्रिक्स जो हमने समझी है, ये हमें हमारे माइंड को बेसिकली एनहांस करती है, मेंटल आर्सेनल में वो टूल प्रोवाइड करती है कि हम कुछ भी सीख सकते हैं लाइफ में। सीखने की जब हमारे अंदर हमें हमें उसके सीखना कैसे चाहिए इसके बारे में भी जानते हैं। तो रिचर्ड फैनमैन की जो रिपोजिटरी विजडम की बहुत बड़ी है। आज मैं आपसे सिर्फ एक ही टॉपिक के ऊपर डिस्कशन कर पाया हूँ, दैट इज की द लर्निंग टेक्निक ऑफ रिचर्ड फैनमैन। तो आगे बहुत ही ऐसे टॉपिक्स हैं जिनके बारे में हम कमिंग और इसके पार्ट 2 में बनाऊंगा, रिचर्ड फैनमैन रिपोजिटरी ऑफ विजडम के पार्ट 2 में, जहाँ पे हम और भी डिस्कशंस और भी टॉपिक्स के बारे में जानेंगे और भी अंडरस्टैंड करेंगे। और रिचर्ड फैनमैन से काफ़ी कुछ सीखने को हमें मिलेगा, जहाँ से हमारी नॉलेज एनहांस होगी। नॉलेज एनहांस होगी तो हमारा मेंटल आंसर में एक और टूल बढ़ेगा, मेंटल मॉडल्स में हमें और एक दुनिया को देखने का हमारा विजन, एक नज़रिया बढ़ेगा। जो नज़रिया बढ़ेगा तो हमें पता लगता है लाइफ में कभी कोई ऐसी प्रॉब्लम आए तो हम उसको टैकल कर सकते हैं टाइम। Thank you. Thanks for reading with me. Thanks for reading with Gurpreet, and thanks for joining in. So today this is the all about a read with Gurpreet session, and coming time we will come with more such reading sessions. So don't forget to subscribe the YouTube channel. Thank you. Bye. Take care.